Good morning. It's Friday the 5th of November. Yorkshire County Cricket Club is going to hold an emergency meeting today to discuss the growing fallout from its handling of a report into racial abuse of a former player.
An investigation found Azeem Rafiq had been the victim of racial harassment, but no disciplinary action was taken against any staff.
The former England captain, Michael Vaughan, has revealed that he's named in the report, but denies any allegations of racism. Simon Jones has more.
A day of reckoning in the racism row. The most successful club in the history of county cricket has remained tight-lipped this week, but as the board meets, heads are expected to roll. An independent panel found the former player Azeem Rafiq had been the victim of racial harassment and bullying while at the club. Yorkshire apologised, but took no action against any member of staff. This week, Yorkshire batsman Gary Bryant said he regretted using a racial slur during conversations with his ex-teammate. He's been suspended from England's selection indefinitely. Now the former England captain, Michael Vaughan, says he too was named in the report for allegedly telling a group of Asian players, including Rafiq in 2009, that there were too many of you lot. But in his Daily Telegraph column, Vaughan writes, "This hit me very hard. It was like being struck over the head with a brick. I have been involved in cricket for 30 years and never once been accused of any remotely similar incident or disciplinary offence as a player or commentator. I completely and categorically deny that I ever said those words." The club has been suspended from hosting international matches by the England and Wales Cricket Board for what it calls the wholly unacceptable handling of Azeem Rafiq's racism claims.
It's really important that ECB sends a message to cricket fans across this country that we will not stand for this, that racism and anything to do with racism and discrimination of any kind has absolutely no place in the game.
The club will suffer financially, but the reputational damage may be far greater. Simon Jones, BBC News.
Opposition parties are discussing not fielding candidates in the by-election triggered by the resignation of Conservative MP Owen Paterson. Instead, Labour, the Lib Dems and Green Party are in talks to back an independent anti-sleaze option.
Mr Paterson stepped down amid a row over him breaking lobbying rules, something he denies. Our political correspondent, Damien Grammaticus, has more.
Owen Paterson resigned yesterday saying he was totally innocent, but the Commissioner for Standards found he'd been paid £100,000 a year by two companies, then lobbied government on their behalf. There will now be a by-election to fill his seat, and the opposition parties look certain to make sleaze one of their central themes. So to replace him, Labour, the Liberal Democrats and the Greens are already considering jointly backing one anti-sleaze candidate. Mr Paterson was in Parliament on Wednesday when the government ordered all Conservative MPs to vote to block his suspension.
The ayes to the right, 250.
The opposition shouted shame.
232.
Shame. Less than 24 hours later, in the face of widespread outrage, the government U-turned. Mr Paterson, once again facing suspension, resigned.
Last night's vote has created a certain amount of controversy. It is important that standards in this House are done on a cross-party basis.
But that's left the government with a problem.
Good evening. It's a nice evening. I hope you're enjoying it.
Could you give us your reaction to the resignation of Owen Paterson?
Look, Owen has made his statement, and I'm sure you've seen it.
The leader of the House of Commons, Jacob Rees-Mogg, still wants to change the system for investigating complaints against MPs, but now has to convince the opposition that talk of reform wasn't just about trying to save Mr Paterson. There really is a need.
I think there will be others. I don't know.
The Labour MP who chairs the existing Standards Committee told BBC Newsnight it's already independent. Wholesale reform isn't necessary.
Our committee already exists. There's absolutely no need for another one. And the way that the government has handled this, I'm afraid, does not augur well for cross-party consideration of this matter.
And the business secretary is under fire too. Yesterday he said the commissioner who found Mr Paterson had broken the rules should consider her position.
Do you still think the commissioner's going to have a difficult time staying in post?
Labour has written to the Prime Minister's ethics advisor saying Kwasi Kwarteng's comments should be investigated as an attempt to bully the Commissioner. The fallout from this affair rumbles on. Damien Grammaticus, BBC News.
Well, let's speak now to our chief political correspondent, Adam Fleming. Morning to you, Adam. You, of course, still in Glasgow for COP26. But Owen Paterson, I mean, the facts are Owen Paterson has resigned. That bit is true. There are a lot of question marks about where all of this leaves politics in Westminster.
Yeah, you get MPs questioning what this has done for the reputation of all MPs and Parliament. You get MPs questioning what this means for the Prime Minister's judgment. And then you've got all the political parties wondering what it means for the upcoming by-election in Owen Paterson's soon-to-be former seat. On that, though, I think it will be quite unlikely that there'll be a joint anti-sleaze candidate standing against the Conservatives. It doesn't look like those cross-party talks are going anywhere, with a Labour source this morning saying to me that if you want to vote for an anti-sleaze candidate, you would vote for the Labour candidate in their view, which suggests to me it will be a standard by-election, even though it's in very unstandard circumstances. Separately, you've now got Labour trying to trigger an investigation by the Prime Minister's independent advisor on ministerial standards into the business secretary. I think the government feels that Kwasi Kwarteng cleared those comments up himself yesterday, and I think they will probably try and resist that. And then you're left with just the human aspect of this. Even if you agree with the report into Owen Paterson that he was guilty of an egregious breach of parliamentary rules, or if you're an ally of Owen Paterson, as there are many on the Conservative backbenches, if you read his statement about what he's gone through personally, it is actually quite moving, irrespective of what you think about what's happened in the official politics.
Adam, for the moment, thank you very much.
Health officials are urging people to ventilate their homes to help stop the spread of COVID in the run-up to Christmas. As part of a government campaign, people are being advised to open windows for 10 minutes each hour when socialising indoors. Research shows that fresh air disperses COVID particles and blows them away, lowering the risk of infecting others.
Tributes have been paid to the veteran entertainer Lionel Blair, who's died at the age of 92.
In a career spanning nearly 80 years, he worked with some of the biggest names in showbiz and established himself as a household name for generations. Robert Townsend looks back at his life.
Entertainer, presenter and choreographer. In a career spanning more than 70 years, Lionel Blair came to epitomise the very definition of a variety performer, whose mischievous wit, flamboyance and ever-twinkling eye kept him popular whatever the decade.
Do it, take what you do, it's the way that you do it. Take what you do, it's the way that you do it. That's what gets results.
It was an early introduction to the industry at the tender age of 13, when he began acting in musical productions. And it wasn't long until television came calling, taking him from child performer to Sammy Davis Jr.'s dance-off competitor in front of the Queen Mother, the Royal Variety performance in 1961.
Oh, sir, we do have a big head, don't we?
How would you like a rap right in your mouth?
He was a regular face on TV game shows, but it was his role as team captain on the hit series Give Us a Clue that made him a real household name.
Girl, dancer, you and her.
I got music. I got my friends who could ask.
In more recent years, he embraced newer TV formats, appearing in reality shows such as The Real Marigold Hotel and Celebrity Big Brother. And despite his advancing years, the chat show invitations kept on coming for one of the last from the golden era of showbiz.
In our kitchen, years ago, before, we had Lino in the kitchen, you see, and my dad would come home. And my dad was a barber, but he'd come home and start to, and I copied him, and I was only about 3 years, but I could always tap dance.
Come on, Lionel.
Among those paying tribute to Lionel is friend and broadcaster Giles Brandreth, who said he would leave behind a legacy of style, smiles and laughter.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.